We're back to scripted content on this channel, instead of on-the-cuff updates and podcasts that tide you over until I can get my shit together. Yay! So, throughout the years, Spider-Man has been tackled by a huge number of writers, artists, directors, actors, and everything you could imagine in comic, television, games, and movies. But which of these stacks up the best? What captures the fundamental elements of this fantastic character, while at the same time managing to be a profoundly great piece of art? I've seen so much Spider-Man over the years, to the point that I don't really think that there's a single major version of this character I haven't experienced. So it really is the season for Spidey, isn't it, right now? A weird spin-off, a new game, a shared universe Dusty Boy, and an animated multiverse film. So, yeah, let's rank it. I'm going to define each incarnation by entire TV shows, as putting in random seasons of a show would just clog up the list. Individual runs by writers on comics, which means however long a single writer applied themselves to telling the Peter Parker story. Individual games, because games can be pretty long, and individual films, because in cinema, quality can drastically rise or lower by installment, so therefore it's easier just to throw in individual movies, because it would take too much to determine how much a bad entry brings down a series. So let's put all of that together and count down to which, in my eyes, is the definitive version of Peter Parker. It's not even 10, I got it down to 9. 9 versions / stories of Spider-Man I absolutely love. I guess spoilers are possible for all on here, so if you're yet to experience one, you can just skip through. First off, I might as well say a few that are dreadful and have no chance of making it, just to lay my foot down. They weren't even ironically considered. Dan Slott's Spider-Man run, Ultimate Spider-Man 2012 TV show, Marvel's Spider-Man 2017 TV show, and the Amazing Spider-Man film series. Okay, and here are a few honorable mentions that I thought I should mention in a video about the best in Spider-Man incarnations, just for a couple of notable aspects, but they didn't make the full cut. The 1960s cartoon, mainly for the theme song and the memes. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, it's a fun little show. And Spider-Man's extended cameo in Captain America Civil War. Fantastic introduction to the character. And now, let's get into the meat of this video.
Can you swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 9, Spider-Man, the animated series. Look, just as much as many, I think this cartoon is sloppy and has some glaring flaws. As I want to present the good along with the bad in this video, I might as well say that the stories are presented in often a nonsensical manner, such as Venom being shoved in super early or Hobgoblin coming first. It's also so stupid to the point it takes me out of the story, like Aunt May fainting and ending up in the hospital because Peter forgot to clean his room. No, like, that's a big subplot in one two-parter. But even though the show itself ranges from good to mediocre, Spider-Man the animated series makes it on here because the version of Spidey in it is rather amazing. It gets the struggle and duality down almost pitch perfect. So a mediocre show, but the way it portrays the central character barely squeaks it in as good enough to be on the central list.
Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 8, Ultimate Spider-Man, the comic. Like many of the others to come on this list, Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man run has some problems. Some of the arcs can get too dragged out. I'm never going to like the idea of the Hulk Green Goblin. Bendis' writing can get a bit up itself sometimes. And I really don't like this MJ and how she and Pete break up a ridiculous amount to where I just stop caring about their relationship. Ultimate Spidey and Kitty for the win. It's unfortunately having to operate in the shit show that is the Ultimate Universe, yet at the same time being the absolute best thing out of that continuity. I'm also not talking about Miles, who I do really like, but this list is focusing on my favorite versions of Peter Parker, and I really like this one a lot. From his origin to his death, this is telling an intriguing alternate take on Peter Parker. I'm looking for portraying the fundamentals of this character with grace, and boy does Ultimate nail it. The big thing that sets Ultimate apart from the bunch is its focus on Peter in high school, to the point where it convinced so many people that high school is always a huge element of the character, when it never, ever, ever was. This comic run best nails the consequence and relatability of a teenage superhero, one complete with stakes, emotion, drama, sadness, and most of all responsibility, all carried through with great art by Mark Bagley. Despite some flaws, it's pretty great. Unless you count that stupid time he came back from the dead in Miles' book looking like some kind of skateboarder from the 90s with long hair and everything, which, no, I'm not counting that.
Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 7. Gary Conway's Spider-Man. Conway is one of the much underrated Spider-Man writers. He had the enormous task of writing the character after the OG writer left, and I think he delivered rather well. Not only are the fundamentals of Peter's character kept completely intact, but he introduced some of the most major and enduring elements of Spider-Man, and even Marvel Comics in general, seeing we received the Punisher in this run. In his many issues on Spidey, Conway developed and defined Mary Jane as a character, gave us the first idea of a clone saga before it got all muddled in the 90s, and not to mention, he was the writer that made the bold choice of killing off Gwen Stacy, the love of Peter's life at this time. All this great material came out when he was only in his 20s, and even later he returned for a great stint on Spectacular Spider-Man, along with the more recent Renew Your Vows book. Definitely one of the best writers ever to touch Spidey, and vastly underrated for his contributions to the character.
Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 6. J. Michael Straczynski Spider-Man. To get it out of the way, yeah, I know this run gave us Sins Past and One More Day, two of the worst Spider-Man stories ever written. And it's not entirely Straczynski's fault, as that of terrible editorial mandates. The thing is, every single other thing on this run is fantastic, to the point that even if those stories are bad, it still more than deserves a spot on this list. J. Michael Straczynski focused on a Peter that is vastly underrepresented in Spidey Incarnations, one who actually grew the hell up and got married. The best thing about this run is that it's focused on the marriage, the struggles to keep it together when someone is a superhero, but the love that keeps bringing these two back together. This is what solidified more than anything that Mary Jane Watson is in-game for Peter Parker. Dan Slott can drag whatever BS love interest he wants out of his ass, but all roads lead back to MJ. Plus, this was the first time we got to explore Aunt May finding out Peter's secret. And it wasn't just a dumb joke crammed in at the back of a storyline. It was an intense and appropriately emotional and dramatic story. Honestly, there's so many fantastic moments in this run. Just skip the ones that I previously mentioned that do bring this down a little low on the list, and you're in for a treat.
Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 5. Spider-Man 2002. This was the first time Spider-Man showed up on the big screen, a cinema screen. Tensions were high. Could Marvel do their most iconic character justice? Would hiring a director known for creatively violent horror camp turn out well? What we got was something that delivered on all fronts, and more. Of course it's slightly dated with early 2000 CGI, and one or two plot beats don't fly perfectly. But so much effort was put into bringing Spidey's story to life that it really doesn't matter. We have an actor that even is slightly old for the part, committed to bringing Peter Parker to life as an awkward kid, thrust into the role of a superhero. We have Willem Dafoe hamming it up magnificently as Norman Osborn, and of course, we have Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben, who brought this to life, this character's motivations, beautifully. Sam Raimi instilled so much heart and love into his direction, and the script by David Coop is brilliantly standalone, and condenses so many elements from all the comics that tell a complete and fulfilling Spidey story, even if this didn't get a sequel. We receive the bite, the powers, the quintessential love interest, the life lesson, the arch enemy. Even if there was never another Spider-Man film, this is a complete story with a fantastic ending. And now, we get into the truly great versions. Let's start off with number 4, Spider-Man, the Insomniac version, or Spider-Man PS4, or Spider-Man. Whatever name you choose. Yay. I finally get to talk, and I might as well say that, yeah, this is new. So, if you have not yet played this, or just watched the 6-hour cutscenes compilation, go do that right now. Because I'm so excited about finally getting to talk about how utterly fantastic Spider-Man PS4 is. This is the newest on here, so I'll need to emphasize that spoiler warning. First off, games have never been my favorite medium for telling a story. So much focus is placed on it being interactive, and I had many doubts on if this could deliver the Peter Parker / Spidey duality that I love. But against all odds, that was what we got. I don't care much about gameplay, so I'm going to focus on the story. But oh my god, is that web swinging so intensely fun. But what made me fall in love with this Spider-Man is how much it cares about the character. Nearly every aspect. It doesn't ignore Uncle Ben, but neither does it slam you with him. You get a picture at the beginning, and little name drops all over the place by Aunt May's conversations and picking up backpacks. And it has that consequence of having to be a superhero and having to live a life. The mission where he has to search all over dumpsters to find his gear after getting evicted from his apartment because he forgot to pay his bills due to the responsibility of being Spider-Man and taking down the Kingpin. That's the sort of Peter Parker chain reaction that hasn't been done right in forever. And it's why I love this game. You can reenact the big battles, but then you're taken to a cutscene of him texting his ex about their relationship. I do have a few issue storylines. Lois Jane works for this story, but I'm still not crazy about it. I think this version of Doc Ock is overrated. So that's why this isn't number one. But the final scene might be my favorite Spidey moment ever. Honestly, my favorite of all time. When, big spoiler, Peter has to decide between Aunt May's life or the rest of New York. And right after a beautiful confession by May that she knows who he is, that she figured it out, that she's proud of him. And after that, he does the right thing. I cried like a baby. It's such a perfect scene that just develops what this character is immaculately and brings him to life. This is beautiful.
Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 3, Spectacular Spider-Man TV series. Spectacular is basically just spectacular. It has the cap on the most straight out Spidey fun with the movements, acrobatics, and probably the best quips from any version. Josh Keaton sells the hell out of him, but at the same time delivers the down-to-earth angst of Peter Parker perfectly. The focus on the high school life is the absolute best it's been in any version, as each character in there has actual personality and is memorable, capping it off with the absolute best adaptation of Flash Thompson ever. It also nails basically all the villains, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, the Sinister Six, and this is my favorite version of Venom across all formats, including the comics. This is the television adaptation that truly balanced the dualism of this character. It knows how to spell a Spidey story and build up plot points over the course of a season. Uncle Ben is mentioned to remind us why Peter is who he is, and then he comes back for tremendous effect. The finale for the show is one of the most genius executions of a reveal I've ever seen on a TV show. The fact that this ended after only 2 seasons is tragic, as you know that the creators behind this had so many ideas for what they could do with this character running into the future, and it's gone.
Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 2, Stan Lee's run on Amazing Spider-Man. This is where this character came from. Everything that has come after this has either attempted to capture or tragically misunderstood all of the fundamentals about this character set up in this fantastic run. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko marked this character immediately as different from all the superheroes you saw faffing about. He was a teenager, not a sidekick, but his own unique hero. He is motivated by a tragedy, but not one he had no control over. It was one he was directly responsible for. He goes through all that intense guilt and becomes a hero. These creators were revolutionary with what they created, and as soon as issue 4, they got the structure of the Spider-Man story down too. They understood that throwing constant struggle with a personal life made everything more interesting for this character. But even as hard as he gets, he keeps striving on, because the lessons of his mistakes that lost his father figure constantly shadow him. Aside from a few, pretty much all the major villains in this entire Spider-Man saga come from this seminal run of creativity and innovation. True, most of them are colorful, gimmicky bank robbers, but they properly establish a conflict for Peter Parker to face while he has to be a normal guy with friends and romantic relationships at the same time. Even when Ramita and other artists came in, the villains were still coming out with unique new looks and personalities. But most of all, this run contains my favorite moment in not just all of Spider-Man comics, but comics in general and media. Just one of my favorite moments ever in any medium. This. When the massive rake crushes down upon the character. All seems lost, but the stakes of caring for his aunt and the tragedy that he would let her down just like his uncle powers him through. This attempted scene in a $200 million movie is pathetic to the 12-cent comic. That's because this run had a creative team that was passionate about making someone who stood apart from the crowd. They made a character that has lasted for 66 years and shall last for generations to come.
Can you swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man.
Number 1. My favorite version of Spider-Man. I think you probably know what it is at this point, but here it is. Spider-Man 2. Right now, you might be questioning this choice. Even if you love this film and you're not on the side that randomly nitpicks it to death, you may wonder why I would even place it above the original Stan Lee run or even Spectacular Spider-Man. And it's naturally down to personal preference. Film is just frankly my favorite format to tell a story. And Spider-Man 2 delivers on bringing a Spidey story to cinematic fluidity perfectly. This is one of my all-time favorite films, and it contains a precise mixture of everything I love about this character. My big thing here is focus on Peter Parker. Its greatest and most precise concern is getting the character of Peter Parker right. It establishes his wants and desires, how his responsibility as Spider-Man is messing that up. It basically delivers an amazing character arc for him to go through, with a villain that parallels that arc magnificently. Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is the best comic book villain of all time in cinema. He loses his powers in here, but not through a complicated villain plot or because he's having a neogenic nightmare, but simply because the intense stress of his job is tearing him apart mentally. What many miss is how this calls back to the original time in the classic comics where he lost his powers, specifically Amazing Spider-Man Annual 1, the first appearance of the Sinister Six. One of the many magnificent things that roots Spidey in the world of relatability is that his fantastic ability is based on his own mental health, at least in the best versions. This tone is brilliantly juggled. So right after he loses his powers, we get a scene set to raindrops are falling on my head, showing Peter finally at peace with himself. But even when it's gone, he knows he's needed. Another fantastic scene that shows the brilliance of this character, and not that he's passive, is the burning building scene. This isn't Spidey saving a life, it's Peter Parker. Spider-Man 2, even if it's hard, even if all the action, the spectacle, it's not just a superhero movie. It's a character drama. You could cut out all the fights and it would still be an effective story. I don't get the complaints of pacing because it's so focused on what this person should be. And that's what's always been interesting about this character. Aunt May's speech about what a hero should be is possibly my favorite scene in superhero film. It's not bombastic, it's not dark, it's just a beautiful monologue that subtly points out what Peter must learn in this movie. Peter gives up MJ because at that point he truly accepts his responsibility. But MJ has her own choice to make. I feel that even though it's not accurate to the supermodel in the comics, this is a good character. After abuse from her father, Peter was the only one who's truly there for her, encouraging her to act and pursue her dreams. And now he just never is. People say that Peter Parker shouldn't be miserable all the time. That him being happy with a super easy life is just fine. Actually, it's a negligible amount in the comics when Peter is happy. And when he is, it should feel earned. Peter randomly asking out a girl he's let down numerous times in the film and her saying yes without a problem is not earned. Peter constantly having the girl he loves be mad at him because he has to do an important job that he can't lose, and his life being in constant shambles in terms of money, and then losing his powers, and all this shit happens to him. When he gets the girl at the end, that is earned. That is good storytelling. All these are reasons why, in my opinion, As a singular entity, Spider-Man 2 is at this point the greatest version of Spider-Man ever created. The music alone encapsulates the spectacle, yet crushing sadness and responsibility that must come with this character. The height of all these elements is the train scene, which makes me cry every single time. Spider-Man 2 is the best Spider-Man ever. Well, this took forever to write, record, and edit. I'll be coming your way with more videos very soon, though I'm the worst at keeping promises, so take that with a grain of salt. Thank you so much for watching. Comment your favorite version of Spidey, and if I've missed any, or if you totally disagree with everything on this list, because I love discussion about this character, and have fun. We can have fun in the comments about that. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you feel sufficiently inclined.